Have you ever wondered what goes through her mind when you stop chasing her? When the calls slow down, the messages fade, and the effort disappears, something shifts. Not just in her, but in the energy between you. It's quiet, yet powerful. And that silence speaks louder than any words you could ever send. At first, she notices. She feels the absence. The attention that once validated her suddenly vanishes, and it catches her off guard. She starts to wonder, was it real? Was she really that special? Or was it all just a game of attention and ego? You see, when you stop chasing, you break a pattern, and the human mind is addicted to patterns. We crave consistency, even in things we claim not to want. Your attention was a pattern. It made her feel seen, desired, significant. When you pull that back, her brain searches for an explanation. It replays conversations. It questions decisions. It starts missing what it once took for granted. And that's where your silence becomes your greatest power. Because silence makes people confront what noise used to hide. Most men don't understand this. They chase harder when they feel ignored. They beg for attention, validation, or closure. But every message, every attempt only weakens their energy. It screams of fear, fear of losing her, fear of being forgotten, fear of not being enough. But when you stop chasing, you communicate something deeper than words ever could: self-respect. You show that your value isn't dependent on someone else's attention. You prove that you're grounded enough to walk away from anything that costs your peace. And here's what truly happens. When you pull away, she begins to feel the absence of your energy. That energy you gave freely now becomes rare, and what's rare becomes valuable. She starts to think about you in moments she didn't expect. In the quiet of her day, in the silence before sleep, in the small moments where she wonders if you've really moved on. And that wondering becomes the seed of realization, the realization that your presence had weight, that your effort was meaningful, that your attention was not something to be wasted. This isn't about playing games. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about understanding that real attraction isn't built on pursuit. It's built on presence, self-worth, and the strength to let go. Chasing her only feeds her certainty, but stepping back forces reflection. It makes her see what she stands to lose. It makes her feel what life is like without the warmth of your consistency. The truth is, when you stop chasing, you stop proving and start attracting. You become the man who doesn't need to convince anyone of his worth because it radiates in his silence. You give her something to respect, something to think about, something to feel. And that shift changes everything. Stay with this till the end, because what happens next is what most men never learn. You'll discover how emotional distance can create magnetic desire. You'll understand how your absence speaks more than your presence ever could. And you'll realize that the real power was never in chasing her. It was in mastering yourself. There's a reason silence shakes people more than words ever could. When you stop reaching out, you remove her emotional safety net. The comfort of knowing you're always there. That quiet space you leave behind becomes a mirror, forcing her to confront what she truly felt. Maybe she told herself you cared more than she did. Maybe she believed she could always have your attention. But when it's gone, she begins to question that belief. She starts to feel the weight of your absence, not because she's lonely, but because something that once made her feel desired has disappeared. The truth is, humans don't miss people. They miss how people made them feel. And when you pull back, she begins to miss the way your presence once stabilized her emotions, the way your words carried warmth and reassurance. It's not just you she starts to think about. It's the version of herself she became when she was with you. That's the quiet psychology of detachment. It awakens reflection. It makes her notice that not all attention feels the same, and not all men are replaceable. When you stop chasing, you show her something rare in a world full of validation seekers. You show control. You show that you have a life beyond her. You show that your emotional world isn't built on someone else's approval. And that unsettles her because confidence without pursuit is magnetic. It makes her wonder what gives you that strength. What makes you so centered that you can walk away with peace instead of pain? That curiosity grows into attraction, not because you're trying to get her back, but because she senses a depth in you that most never discover. Every time you resist the urge to text, to check her story, to remind her you exist, you reclaim a piece of your power. You remind yourself that you are not defined by someone's attention span. You are defined by your ability to stand tall when silence tries to shake you. And that's where growth happens. In the stillness, in the waiting, in the moments when your emotions beg for action, but your discipline chooses strength instead. She might test you. She might post things to get a reaction, reach out casually, or act like she doesn't care. But her actions are not the measure of your worth. Her attention is not your reward. Your true victory is in how you respond, with calm, with focus, with purpose. Because the man who doesn't chase becomes the man who attracts. He radiates stability in a world full of noise. He communicates value without speaking a word. This is where you begin to separate yourself from the crowd. Most people crumble when ignored, they panic, they react, they beg. But not you. You understand that detachment is not indifference. It's emotional intelligence. It's the quiet confidence that says, I don't need to prove my value, I live it. And that energy is impossible to fake. It's what makes people wonder what changed in you. So stay still, stay strong, and let the silence work in your favor. Because every second you hold your ground, every moment you choose peace over panic, you're teaching the world and her how to treat you. You're not walking away out of weakness. You're rising in self-respect. And the moment you do, everything about how she sees you begins to change. When you stop chasing, something remarkable happens inside you. The noise in your mind begins to quiet. The constant thoughts of what she's doing, who she's with, or why she hasn't replied start to lose their grip. You begin to notice the space that once felt empty isn't emptiness at all. It's clarity. That silence you once feared becomes your sanctuary. It's where you begin to rebuild the relationship that truly matters, the one with yourself. Because before you can connect deeply with anyone, you must first reconnect with your own strength, your own peace, your own purpose. You start to see things differently. You realize how much energy you used to spend trying to prove your worth to someone else. Every message, every overthought action, every emotional chase, it was all an attempt to be chosen. But now you see the truth. You were never meant to beg for recognition. You were meant to embody it. You were meant to walk in such self-awareness that your presence commands respect without you having to demand it. That shift is where power begins. It's subtle, but it's undeniable. It's the calm confidence that comes when you no longer need external validation to feel whole. As you stand in that silence, you begin to attract differently. The people who once overlooked you start to notice. The energy around you changes because you've changed. You're no longer reaching outward. You're radiating inward strength. And that energy draws in not just women, but opportunities, growth, and respect. Because the universe responds to energy that knows its own value. You no longer chase what isn't meant for you because you've learned that what's meant for you will never need to be hunted. It will flow naturally toward the man who is grounded in purpose. Psychologically, something powerful unfolds. Detachment rewires your emotional system. It trains your brain to find fulfillment from within instead of chasing it from without. You become emotionally resilient. You stop reacting to temporary emotions and start responding with wisdom. You begin to feel free, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that peace is more valuable than attention. This freedom is addictive. It becomes the new standard for how you live, love, and connect. And as you rise into that peace, she feels it too. She senses that you've stopped orbiting around her world. You've stepped back into your own. That subtle shift unsettles her, not out of ego, but out of awareness. She feels the difference between a man who needs her and a man who chooses himself. And that difference is magnetic. It challenges her. It makes her see you through a new lens, one tinted with respect, curiosity, and maybe even regret. But here's the real beauty. You're no longer doing it for her, you're doing it for you. You're no longer trying to make her see your worth. You're learning to live like a man who already knows it. That's the transformation most never reach, because it requires stillness, patience, and self-trust. But once you find it, everything changes. You stop chasing love, and love starts chasing you. Because the most attractive thing in this world is a man who no longer seeks to be validated. He simply is. The moment you stop chasing is the moment you start commanding energy instead of wasting it. You begin to understand that every time you tried to convince someone of your worth, you were silently telling yourself you didn't believe it. Now that belief is shifting. You're no longer looking outward for validation. You're looking inward for alignment. And that change radiates through everything you do. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way you move through the world. It all carries a quiet power that doesn't need to be explained. That's what makes it irresistible. She feels that power too. Not in what you say, but in what you no longer give away so easily. The constant availability that once dulled your mystery is gone. The emotional energy that once surrounded her like air has turned inward, fueling your purpose instead of her comfort. She might not understand it at first, but she feels it. She senses the emotional shift, the peace in your silence, the confidence in your absence. That's when her mind starts to wander. She begins to ask herself questions she never asked before. What changed? Why does it feel different? Why does his silence feel louder than my words? And in that questioning, curiosity is born. But the beauty is, by this point, your focus isn't on her thoughts anymore. You're evolving beyond the need to be understood. You're chasing discipline, purpose, and growth instead of attention. You're learning that the man who is focused on his mission naturally becomes magnetic. Because there's nothing more attractive than direction. A man who walks towards something greater than himself doesn't have to chase love, it aligns with him. Love becomes a byproduct of his focus, not the goal of his existence. Psychologically, this is where emotional detachment becomes empowerment. It's not about cutting her off, it's about cutting off dependency. You no longer see her as the source of your happiness, but as a chapter that awakened your self-awareness. That shift changes the vibration of your energy. You become the kind of man who doesn't react to being ignored. He reflects, recalibrates, and rises. And when you rise, the energy of desperation dies. That's when attraction stops being about validation and starts being about vibration. People are drawn to your balance, your calm, your unshakable sense of self. The truth is, the chase was never about her. It was about your fear of not being enough. But once you face that fear, it loses its control over you. You stop overthinking what she feels and start mastering how you feel. You stop chasing attention and start cultivating presence. You stop proving your value and start embodying it. That's the moment you reclaim everything you once gave away too freely, your time, your focus, your energy, your power. And as that transformation takes root, something profound happens. Peace starts to feel better than attention. Growth feels better than validation. And purpose feels better than approval. You begin to live from strength, not from scarcity. You realize that walking away wasn't the loss. It was the beginning of becoming everything you were meant to be. Because the man who no longer chases is the man who finally leads. When you stop chasing, you start observing. You see things with clearer eyes, patterns, behaviors, energies that once blinded you because you were too focused on earning affection. Now, with distance, you notice the truth you once ignored. You see how much of your peace you traded for moments of temporary validation. You see how often you lowered your standards just to feel noticed. And that awareness hurts at first, but it's the kind of pain that transforms. Because from that pain, clarity is born. And clarity is the foundation of real power. You begin to realize how little control you ever had over another person's feelings, and how much control you always had over your own. That's the lesson the chase hides from most people. It keeps them running in circles, thinking if they just do more, prove more, give more, they'll finally be seen. But when you stop running, you realize you were never chasing love, you were chasing self-worth. And that's the most liberating realization of all. Because once you stop seeking it externally, you start building it internally. You start to see yourself not through someone else's reaction, but through your own reflection. and that reflection begins to change. The man who once sought permission to feel valued now moves like he already is. You speak differently, not with the desperation to be heard, but with the calm of someone who knows his truth. You walk with quiet authority, not arrogance. You lead with peace, not pressure. That energy is what people feel when they meet you. It's not loud, but it's undeniable. It's what makes someone look at you twice, not because of how you look, but because of how you carry yourself. You've stopped chasing, and now your energy draws everything meant for you closer. Psychology calls this emotional transference, the shift from external attachment to internal security. It's the foundation of self-respect, and it's what makes your silence powerful. When you no longer seek someone to complete you, you create a vibration of wholeness, and wholeness is magnetic. It's why people return when you stop waiting. It's why those who once overlooked you suddenly pay attention. You haven't changed who you are. You've changed where you place your power. And the beauty is, she notices. She might not admit it, but she feels it. The attention she once received effortlessly is gone, replaced by a new kind of energy, one that makes her question her place in your world. She starts to sense that she no longer defines your emotional weather. That realization stirs something inside her, something she didn't expect: respect. Because deep down, everyone respects the one who refuses to be controlled by emotion. Everyone feels drawn to the one who walks away with dignity instead of drama. This is where true attraction begins, not in pursuit, but in presence. Not in convincing, but in becoming. You're no longer chasing love, you're creating it within yourself. You're no longer waiting for validation, you're radiating certainty. That's when everything changes, because the man who no longer chases is no longer bound by fear. He's driven by purpose, fueled by peace, and guided by self-mastery. And when you reach that level of strength, no rejection can shake you, no silence can break you, and no loss can define you. You become untouchable, not because you're numb, but because you're finally free. The moment you stop needing to be chosen, everything in your life begins to realign. Your energy no longer leaks through uncertainty, it flows through purpose. You no longer move from desperation, you move from direction. The weight of overthinking, of constantly wondering what she feels or why she pulled away, begins to dissolve. You start to understand that your worth doesn't fluctuate based on who stays or who leaves. It remains constant, unshaken, untouched, undeniable. And that realization changes the way you carry yourself in every aspect of life. You stop chasing love and start chasing mastery. You stop trying to be impressive and start becoming impactful. What she feels when you stop chasing isn't just curiosity, it's awareness. She begins to sense the shift in your vibration. The man who once sought validation has become the man who gives it to himself. That confidence doesn't need to announce itself, it simply exists. It's in your stillness, in your patience, in the calm way you handle uncertainty. That kind of strength is rare. It's the kind of energy that can't be ignored, because it creates contrast. It reminds her and the world that peace is powerful. You begin to realize that the true chase was never about another person. It was about your potential. Every ounce of energy you once gave to proving yourself now fuels your purpose. You start to build, to grow, to elevate. The gym becomes your discipline, your goals become your obsession, and your silence becomes your teacher. You no longer need to tell anyone what you're becoming. Your results will speak it for you. You transform from the man who waits for attention into the man who commands respect through action. And that's when the balance shifts completely. She begins to feel something she didn't expect: loss. Not of possession, but of presence. She realizes she can no longer access your energy the way she used to. That warmth, that reassurance, that emotional safety, it's gone. It's not revenge, it's evolution, because you've learned something most people never do: the power of self-withdrawal, the ability to pull back your energy, not to manipulate, but to protect your peace. It's the highest form of self-respect, and it's what separates men who seek attention from men who command it. Psychologically, this detachment sends a clear signal. Your world doesn't revolve around her anymore. And that's what truly triggers attraction. Because when someone realizes they no longer have emotional control over you, they start to see your value more clearly. The mystery returns. The respect returns. The desire to reconnect grows. But this time, the power dynamic has changed. You're no longer the one seeking validation. You've become the validation. This isn't arrogance. It's balance. It's the maturity of a man who's done chasing temporary emotions and started pursuing permanent growth. You've evolved from needing someone to notice you, to becoming someone impossible to ignore. And once you reach that level, everything about the way you love changes. You love from strength, not from fear. You give without losing yourself. You walk away without resentment. That's when you understand the deepest truth of all. When you stop chasing her, you start finding yourself, and that's the version of you she can never forget. There's a peace that comes when you stop trying to be understood. You no longer chase explanations, closure, or validation. You stop trying to make her see what she lost, because you finally understand that people only recognize value when they're ready. And you're done waiting for that moment. Your energy shifts from convincing to becoming, from explaining to evolving. You begin to move differently, think differently, and live differently. Everything that once consumed you begins to lose its power, not because it stopped mattering, but because you stopped giving it control over your emotions. When you stop chasing, you detach from the illusion that love must be earned through effort. Real connection doesn't require you to chase. It requires you to align, and alignment starts within you. Start focusing on what makes you stronger, wiser, calmer. You invest in yourself the same way you once invested in her. You read, you train, you heal, you rebuild. You become addicted to self-improvement. And through that process, something extraordinary happens. You begin to feel whole. Not the kind of temporary confidence that fades when someone notices you, but the kind that grows every time you keep your word to yourself. Every time you choose peace over reaction. Every time you walk away from what doesn't serve you. That wholeness becomes your new power. Because when you are whole, you no longer operate from fear. You don't chase love, you express it. You don't beg for attention, you attract it. You don't crumble when rejected, you recalibrate. That level of inner security is rare, and it's magnetic. It commands respect from everyone around you, including her. She begins to sense the shift. The man who once tried to prove his worth is now living it quietly, confidently, unapologetically. And that realization creates an emotional dissonance inside her. She starts to compare the version of you she knew with the one you've become. The version she took for granted with the one the world now admires. And that comparison burns deeper than any words ever could. But by now your focus has changed. You're not trying to make her see what she missed. You're too busy becoming the man who never settles for less than he deserves. You no longer need her attention as validation of your growth. Her recognition isn't your goal. It's just a byproduct of your evolution. You've stepped into a level of emotional maturity that most never reach, because it requires solitude, self-awareness, and strength. And you've found all three in your silence. Psychologically, you've reversed the dynamic. What was once attachment is now awareness. What was once pursuit is now presence. You're no longer reacting to emotion, you're mastering it. That mastery gives you control, not over others, but over yourself. And that's the real freedom, the ability to stay centered no matter who stays or leaves. That's the kind of confidence that doesn't fade. So you keep walking. You keep growing. You keep living in alignment with your purpose. And soon, the same silence that once felt painful becomes your greatest strength. It speaks for you. It radiates your evolution. It reminds everyone who crosses your path that you are not a man who chases. You are a man who attracts. You are not seeking validation. You are embodying value. And in that truth lies your final transformation. You've stopped chasing her because you've found something far greater. You've found yourself. There's a strength that emerges when you no longer react to silence with panic. You stop filling the space with desperate words or impulsive actions. You learn to sit in the stillness, and that stillness becomes your training ground. It teaches you emotional control. It teaches you patience. It teaches you that peace isn't found in what happens outside of you. It's found in how you respond inside of you. The man who masters that response becomes untouchable. Because when you no longer chase, you stop depending on the outcome. You stop trying to force connection. And you start attracting what aligns naturally. That's the foundation of emotional freedom. You start to understand that detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care correctly. You care without losing yourself. You love without surrendering your power. You give without expecting a return. That balance is what defines emotional maturity. It's what separates men who crumble under rejection from men who rise from it. When you detach, you begin to see that not everyone deserves access to your energy. Not everyone has earned the right to your consistency, your loyalty, or your time. You start to protect your peace with the same intensity you once protected her comfort. That shift is what changes everything. Psychologically, it's one of the most powerful transformations a person can experience. You move from emotional dependence to emotional mastery. Your happiness no longer lives in someone else's attention. It lives in your discipline, your growth, your progress. You start to find joy in self-control. You start to feel powerful when you say less, react less, expect less. Because each time you do, you reclaim a piece of your identity that was once lost in pursuit. You realize that the most confident version of you doesn't chase validation. It commands respect through silence, consistency, and presence, and she feels that shift. Even if she doesn't say it, she senses it. The energy that once revolved around her now surrounds you. You're no longer reaching out, but she feels pulled in. Not because you're trying to make her feel that way, but because your energy has become rare. It has become grounded, and in a world full of noise, grounded energy becomes magnetic. It's not your absence she misses, it's the calm strength behind it. It's the realization that you were never just attention, you were stability. You were the kind of presence that brought peace, and once peace is gone, chaos begins to whisper. But by now, you're not waiting for her to realize it. You're too focused on becoming the man who no longer needs to be remembered to feel significant. You've evolved beyond the emotional games that used to keep you trapped in cycles of confusion and doubt. Now your energy is clean, purpose-driven, peaceful, powerful. You've learned that the chase was never about love, it was about fear. And once you release fear, you release control. You stop needing closure because your growth has already closed the chapter for you. You stand taller now. Your silence is no longer a weapon, it's wisdom. Your calmness is no longer misunderstood, it's respected. You've stepped into a version of yourself that doesn't seek to prove anything to anyone. You've become the man who leads, not because he's trying to impress, but because he's aligned with his truth. And in that truth, you've found the deepest kind of peace. The kind that no one can take away because it doesn't depend on being chased or chosen. It lives within you. There's a quiet confidence that begins to define you when you've stopped chasing what was never meant to be captured. You no longer move through life hoping to be chosen. You walk as someone who has already chosen himself. That shift is spiritual. It's emotional evolution. It's the moment when you stop seeing rejection as a wound and start recognizing it as redirection. You begin to understand that every closed door protected you from something that would have drained your purpose. Every unanswered message was a lesson in patience. Every silence a mirror reflecting your strength back at you. You start realizing that you were never losing her, you were finding you. And as that realization deepens, something powerful awakens inside you. You become grounded not in arrogance but in awareness. You no longer chase attention because your purpose now gives you direction. You wake up with focus, not confusion. You stop replaying old memories and start building new standards. The emotional weight that once made you restless becomes the resistance that strengthens your core. You learn to be alone without being lonely, to care without clinging, to love without losing yourself. That's the essence of masculine balance, the ability to feel deeply while standing firmly. The irony is, this balance doesn't push people away, it draws them in, because true confidence isn't about being unreachable, it's about being unshakable. When a man moves with peace instead of desperation, his energy becomes a sanctuary. She feels that difference instantly. She notices the shift in your tone, your timing, your priorities. You're no longer waiting for her to text, you're too busy investing in your own growth. You're not reacting to her distance, you're expanding within your silence. And that quiet expansion speaks volumes. It tells her that your world doesn't collapse without her. It continues to rise beyond her. Psychologically, this is the point where attraction transforms. What once was a chase becomes curiosity. What once was pressure becomes presence. She starts to feel the gravity of your absence, not because you vanished, but because your energy is no longer seeking her approval. That's when desire begins to shift. The same silence that once made her comfortable now makes her question. The same distance that once meant disinterest now radiates mystery. She begins to wonder what changed, and more importantly, why she feels drawn back to what she once overlooked. But the truth is, you don't need her realization anymore. You've reached a level of internal peace that doesn't depend on someone else's awareness. You've found fulfillment in your progress, satisfaction in your purpose, and confidence in your solitude. You've learned to live from abundance, not attachment. The version of you that used to chase is gone, replaced by a man who moves through life with conviction. Every decision you make now is intentional. Every silence is deliberate. Every step forward is taken with power. And in that power, you discover something deeper than attraction. You discover freedom. The freedom to walk away when peace is disturbed. The freedom to give love without fear of losing yourself. The freedom to stand alone and still feel complete. That's what she truly sees when you don't chase. Not distance, but dignity. Not ego, but evolution. Not rejection, but rebirth. You've become a man who no longer runs after what he desires, because he has become the kind of man who naturally attracts everything he deserves.